why is this COP important to us? Conferences like these, can seem very removed from everyday life, but they're very critical because the decisions that happen here in these rooms basically affect what happens in terms of our livelihoods, in terms of how we survive going forward. We are already at 1.1 degree warming right now, and if we don't upscale or increase our mitigation ambition, um, it's possible that a lot of the islands within our region are no longer going to exist. We're talking about mass movement of people losing their identity, their culture loss. So we have all of these factors that are in play. So it's important that sorry, it's important that we are here, we are at this seat, we're at the conversation, we are part of the decisions that are going to be made to ensure that what the outcome of this, we're able to have a livable future for our generation and generations to come. In terms of capacity building that is happening within the region, on the island of Grenada, one of the capacity building activities that CYEN does is we have an education and awareness program that's funded by the British High Commission, where we increase the knowledge and capacity of young persons on the island to ensure that they are aware of what is happening. A lot of people know the term climate change, but in terms of understanding the intricacies of it and the need for action, um, we need to ensure that we educate them, we improve their capacity so that they too can seek how they can create and develop innovative initiatives that would help to drive the ambition as well as implement our NDCs. Thank you.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that, Renee. And we're just grateful to have the opportunity to be and to participate in these kinds of conversations. And this is the implementation COP, so we are hopeful that indeed we will see what needs to be done for SIDS who are on the front line. So, Giovanni, I am interested in hearing from you about how you think that we can continue financing gaps for effective implementation of NDCs, as well as increasing calls for integration of young people in NDCs implementation. And how can we practically accelerate the delivery of finance for youth-led efforts?
I think first question, just to the audience, how many of us here were involved in our country's NDC revision process? Okay, maybe I'll ask it again. How many of us here were involved in our country's NDC revision process? Um, exactly. And so this essentially shows sort of the first challenge where we have it, in advancing NDC implementation, as we spoke about the COP27 being implementation COP. But as the youth voice, if we are not actively involved within the implementation, the revision process, which is then inevitably it makes it more difficult to get involved in the implementation aspect of it. So I think aspect. Yeah, good. Okay. Okay. I think the challenge with the financing aspect, like I said, first step one is to get our organizations involved within the revision process. And I think in that case as well, it's also important that as youth-led organizations, that we set up internal structures that are stable enough that could seem, attractive to potential funders and so on. The first towards how can we develop innovative financing instruments, because of course we know the challenges with accessing climate finance, and as a youth-led organization, maybe somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in Africa, somewhere in the Caribbean, to be able to meet all the requirements for that can be quite difficult. So the question is, how do we use our subnational institutions to allow us to easily access that could support our efforts on the ground? So I think it's important that as well the collective voice, that we continue to support youth coalitions that will allow us to have that common thrust in being able to access funds that could have a major impact and not just working in silos within our respective regions and our respective areas. So I think that is important. Get involved in the revision process. If you are not heard, make yourself heard. And of course, from there, I believe it will be inevitable that within the implementation process, post COP27, we'll be better able to mobilize the finance necessary for youth-led climate action. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Giovanni. As the youth, we must value our opinions. And from there, once we understand that we do have something to give, then we can also seek to find those ways to contribute. And we hope that our voices will be heard in these spaces. So Dr. Jacinta,
I'm doing it now.
I'd like to welcome you now to do your presentation on your climate story.
All right, this is very, very important. Not the video.
Yo, Alpha, Monster, this one is global. 1.5 to stay alive. Caribbean people are
as Hurricane Dorian passed over, it demolished, it decimated, it destroyed, it caused people to have to be relocated. So now we have thousands of what you call climate change refugees. There are now 10, 15, and 20 people living in one house. Some of them now living with strangers. So as a result of the vulnerability of women and girls, it is now affecting all of them. And so who are the vulnerable people in your communities? Who are the vulnerable people and marginalized in your countries? So first of all, if you met Joe Biden, President Joe Biden came in just now, and he said that he has $3.4 billion dollars for the Caribbean. What is it that you are going to ask him for? Can you, with passion and professionalism and with divine purpose, share with him what the needs are of your community? And so therefore your story has to be credible. It has to be reliable, based on actual facts. It has to also be credible with regards to authenticity. Do you know what it is that you're asking for? And so fire stations, schools, clinics, houses. In Abaco alone, many of the students have to now be relocated to another island because the homes got destroyed, and teachers, police officers, and nurses are no longer returning to Abaco because there is no safe space for them. Additionally, you have persons who are walking around zombified. We don't have enough psychosocial help for them. A grandmother told her family, they said, "Come on, Nana, you have to evacuate." She said, "No, I cannot leave my house. This is all I have." She never had a need to evacuate before, and so she didn't. And the hurricane came, and sure enough, Nana's entire family got washed out in the ocean. And she's the only one survived. But she is not, no longer in her right mind. And so therefore, there are many vulnerable people. Persons have been displaced. They witnessed 17 feet of ocean water come on land and flooded every single thing. Cars, homes, furniture, clothing, everything moved. And so we are saying to you that as we look over the Caribbean islands, the stretch of Caribbean islands, climate change is real. The effects and impacts are stronger. They're more devastating. And so we're asking us with one voice, as Excellency Mia Motley admonished us, we now need to put it in writing. It cannot be in our heads or in our minds. It has to be in policy documents and presented so that we can be protected. Thank you very much for listening to our stories.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacinta, for that very passionate and powerful presentation. And I think one of the key things that we can take away from that is that as we as the youth, if we are to contribute meaningfully to these conversations, we must be aware. And environmental awareness is something that we as the Caribbean Youth Environment Network is very passionate about. And at this time, we would like to replay the video, 1.5 to Stay Alive.
Yo, Alpha, Monster, this one is global. 1.5. Yo, Alpha, Monster, this one is global. 1.5 to stay alive. Caribbean people are survivors on the line. We can't afford to waste time. That's 1.5 to stay alive. We should be no warning. Then we come together to fight against global warming. Cause we can't afford 2 degrees increase. All the policy makers have to consider this. Yeah, we must keep it under 1.5. Climate change is a serious thing, so we got to do what is right and hold it down. The temperature, hold it down. It's too much heat, hold it down. Natural disasters on the increase, hold it down. Sea levels rising, hold it down. Mother Earth is crying, hold it down. We must do something now. 1.5 to stay alive. Caribbean people are survivors on the line. We can't afford to waste time. That's 1.5 to stay alive. We should be no warning. Then we come together to fight against global warming. Yeah.
We in the Caribbean and other island states across the Indian, Pacific and Atlantic Ocean are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. Although we contribute least to global warming, we are likely to suffer most from its adverse effects. So join the movement and let your voice be heard. We cannot allow global temperatures to increase by more than 1.5 degrees.
No. St. Vincent, Grenada, hold it down. St. Kitts and Antigua, hold it down. Martinique, Jamaica, hold it down. Dominica, yeah, hold it down. In the Indian Ocean, hold it down. In the Pacific Ocean, hold it down. From Mama Africa back to St. Lucia. 1.5 to stay alive. Caribbean people are survivors on the line. We can't afford to waste time. That's 1.5 to stay alive. We should be no warning. Then we come together to fight against global warming. Hold it down.
In the context of climate finance is because one of the main discussions or making key themes, especially happening in the COP, is with regards to climate finance. And something I have noticed working with the policy space, storytelling, working for the human rights, is understanding their climate finance were only allocated in the first time when they were displaced. After that, there is no, multi-annual funding or anything on an annual basis or something that's for a long term. It was a short-term funding that was provided to them and something that they had to work with. And soon after, so the main issue that we have been raising, or the main thing we have been raising with the policy stakeholders, is to have long-term funding. Multi-stakeholder funding, which is long-term, which is not just annual, but something that is recurring. Something that's not just something funding that we could use when the disaster has happened or when the people have been displaced, but something that we could use for their rehabilitation, for helping them out of this crisis. So the main issue was these people were living in such densely populated rooms while the COVID pandemic was happening. While such a huge health crisis was taking place, these people were just completely packed in different rooms and, There were births happening, there were like deaths happening, all in a very isolated small area. So their human rights is violated. We need proper climate finance, which is looking at a long-term perspective, which is not just short-term when they were displaced and then their crisis is over or their news cycle is done. They are not, given value anymore. So we need that funding for a very long term. We need multi-stakeholders. We need diverse fund to help them move out of this particular crisis and understand their needs. I can keep talking about it as long as we need, but I think we'll move on to other perspectives also.
Thank you, Akhilesh. And we all know that it's been record more than 55 million people have been uprooted, and there is no best person than Zainab who has experience from the Pakistan from the ground level. Zainab, would you like to sharing the thought what you have seen and you have been facing now?
Thank you, Vikrant. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the session. I see the climate-induced migration from multiple perspectives. Recently, during the Pakistan floods, 33 million people have been displaced, and major cities of the country were underwater after floods, right? So again, the climate crises are linked with the different sectors. It's not just the climate that's there. It's not just the people that have been displaced. It's a whole cycle. Like economy has been disrupted. People need finance to build back better, and it will take years for them to build back. It's not easy. They don't even have a single brick of their house at their place, right? Again, reflecting back, it's very important that we together join our hands and ask for the timely release of the finance for these people so that they can utilize resources and they can be rehabilitated for their livelihoods and stuff. And then again, in Pakistan's context, we do have refugees from Afghanistan. So I think that adds to the factor that they already were replaced from their home country. They came in Pakistan, they migrated. Now, when they were trying to rehabilitate, we have these floods. And these floods are not like the first floods. We had massive floods in 2010, and this was the second massive episode, and I think this is gonna repeat if we don't take the timely action. And I think the third point that I would like to add here is again, uh, if we are not going to take the timely action, then the impacts of the climate change are going to exacerbate by multiple levels. And let's say if we need 10,000 rupees today, tomorrow we might need three times more finance just to deal with the catastrophic impacts, like, right? So it's very important that we take timely action and we mobilize the resources, we mobilize the partners, we invite the private stakeholders and invite them to join hands to support these organizations, because I think people have been doing amazing work, but it's very important that we have a proper mechanism which should be definitely transparent, which should be backed by the evidence and research, how this money is gonna be spent and how it's gonna help people, not just to build back better, but in a sustainable manner. How it's gonna help them build back better in a sustainable manner, that they are self-sufficient to support themselves after that catastrophic episode of floods. I think as of now, these are my thoughts on your question.
Yeah, thank you, Zainab, and we will definitely be coming back to you and love to hear more. And we would love to learn more, Romchat. What are the current mechanisms we have in this particular context?
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Romchat from UN Human Rights Office, OHCHR, not not UNSCR. So we are not the UNSCR refugees entities, but we are working on human rights issue, and UN Human Rights Office is working, and advocating for human rights-based approach to climate action, which is mean both adaptation and mitigation effort. So our main topic of today's panel is the climate finance in the context of climate mobilities. I would like to share some of the key entry points we at the OHCHR, UN Human Rights, is advocating and sharing with the member states and following at the negotiations. One thing I think the children and youth can monitor and closely engage is the adaptation, because I think most of this is the root cause of forcing people to leave their home, and people are more likely to leave their homes if they are not provide adequate protection and assistance to adapt to climate harms. So effort to address the cause of forced migration in the context of climate change should seek to protect human rights of people, strengthen social protection systems, reduce disaster risk and exposure, and increase adaptive capacities. Another key entry points I would like to share for your food for thought and for your key entry point when you have a chance to discuss and meet with the parties or representatives of your countries is loss and damage. This is a very important discussion of today's COP 27, because if I don't know if you have followed the negotiation, but at the Santiago network, we have been discussing about the climate facilities of loss and damage. So effort to integrate human rights in loss and damage discussion at COP27 should address the work of Warsaw International Mechanism, including the Task Force of Displacement, the Glasgow Dialogue, and operationalization of the Santiago network that I just mentioned. And we cannot forget the participatory approach and inclusivity of these negotiations. I would like to insist that the right of participation, access to information is human rights, and the human rights-based approach would be the right entry point to strengthen the participation of children and youth, because you are the ones who will be affected the most by the impact of climate change.
Thank you, Romchat, and we will be coming back to you to learn more about what's still lacking in migration, climate refugee, and all. But coming back to you, Zainab, because we all know that there is a war refugee and lousy government and climate change and intersectional with loss and damage and all. So what are your perspective when you see the internal displacement and related to climate finance, what you people need and what we can take an example for the rest of the country?
Yeah, I think the question is very pertinent when we talk about the climate refugees in perspective of the people who have been impacted by the war and extremism. So I think this kind of links back to the informal sector. For example, we have like an informal industrial sector which are not properly addressed in the policies. So, you know, they are just excluded from the policy making part. I think the same case is very valid for the refugees impacted by the wars and extremism, that they are not made part of the policies, and there are unfortunately no policies to address you know, their issues. They are just excluded from the system, right? So this is how you will find like slums and these nomadic groups. And whenever there are like unfavorable conditions, they are gonna migrate to any other place and then any other place. And I think this also again is gonna impact economy, because they don't have a sustainable means of the livelihood, right? So and they are this way then adding a negative impact to an economy, I would say. So again, there is a need to address and include the informal sector, because we talk a lot about inclusive policy making, but how we are going to make these policy inclusive, it's very important. It's very important that if we are going to have policies for these people, then we should invite these people to be part of the policy making. You cannot make policies for a people living in X place while you are living in a Y place, right? So you need to go either to them or either bring them to the policy making spaces, help them claim their spaces, empower them so that they are able to present their case and they are able to share their thoughts and inputs on how they feel about being displaced and how they feel about not having a roof on their head, right? So I think it's not about one person. There are like millions of families. There are like hundreds of stories that we will find on our media when we go to these places, especially I would say the slums and also some of the rural communities, because they find some minimum resources to be there and they try to actually thrive on the minimum resources available. So again, it's very important that the first step that we can take is to communicate, to know what they want and what actually is missing. Once we are going to identify that particular gap that exists, then I think we can build up and we can further make the policies or whatever is needed at the national level.
Thank you, Zainab. Coming back to Romchat, your office is already implementing a range of projects and implementing a much needed to come across this climate refugee and fight for it. But still, we are lacking a couple of things which we need to do because you are working with the civil society and other offices. So, what you see we need to address now? I mean, what it is still to be addressed?
Hello. Thank you for your question. Yes, as I mentioned, UN Human Rights Office is working on the human rights based approach to the climate action, which means to widen the civic space and meaningful participation, effective participation of all affected people, stakeholders, and marginalized groups in the climate decision making. So we are working to widen this space for all of the people to engage with these kind of negotiations. And children and youth is one among of the group of population that we are working with. I don't have any suggestion for children and youth anymore because you are one of the most energetic, powerful, loudest voice among all of the stakeholders. But what we have to do more in terms of the United Nations Human Rights Office or with the stakeholders is to support you to have this space, accommodate this space for you in the negotiation room. I can see a lot of struggle for children and youth to make a voice in those negotiation rooms or even to raise your voice there. So that what I don't, as I mentioned, that is what we have to work better to have you more meaningfully engaged at the negotiation.
Thank you, Romchat. I mean, this is affecting people's lives, well-being, but it also been not limited to their economical potential, and it's leading to $1 billion of loss each and every year. And now we are gonna take this opportunity to take this one step ahead and launch an initiative which will be called as the Global Alliance for Climate Induced Migration. It will be an alliance to set up to address the gap and the issue that affect the climate refugee and internal displacement community affected by the climate change. And we will be addressing it through research, policy, human rights, and finance, of course. So thank you everyone for joining this session, and we'll surely want you to be stay after this session for like 2 minutes, and we will be introducing with QR codes and everything so you can join this session. and be a part of the international alliance to not just to uh, deal with the word climate refugee, but the cross section of its like the loss and damage to provide the direct support of climate finance to these. We understand when we heard the word climate refugee, we only think that it's when the people travel from one country to another, but it is not like that. People do travel from coastal region to different places, and it need to be addressed, it need to be amplified, and we need to set up these aligned, and we need to come up with a proper definition, proper text that could be included in the upcoming UN forum. So thanks Romchat, thanks Zainab, thanks Akhilesh. It's been wonder to be hearing you and seeing a lovely audience, and I'm sure we will be connecting more in this particular event in the coming days. Thank you, everyone.